Lee has got a microphone. We have microphones in the hall. Time for questions from the floor. Do you have any? If you do, can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and who your question's for? That would be marvellous. And your little hands in the air, if you would. Questions for our panel. There must be some. Sir, gentleman right at the front.
Coffee. Hi, my name is Austin Antonio. I work for the Greater London Authority as Head of Energy. I was wondering, what's the role of behavioural change? Changing hearts and minds. How do we get to that point when no politician, no matter their colour, will ever take any action to take us backwards on net zero?
Brilliant question. Behaviour change. Where do we go? Let's start with Monalisa.
Yes, I think that's a very good question, behavioural change. And in Schneider Electric, what we could understand is that our earlier CEO, JPT, Jean-Pascal Chekwa, he actually started this movement, and we really went to the entire organization with a lot of communication. First is knowledge. Are we aware? The awareness part. Then communication about sustainability, about net zero in each and every forum. So I think the culture change is very important, which is said. And it's a very simple thing. More knowledge, more awareness, communicate, communicate, and communicate. It was a long journey for us also. When we started talking about it in 2010, 11, 12, people were like, what is this? But then now I would say everyone of our organization knows. Now we are a private organization, a multinational organization, but what we did also is that we incorporated those not only in our communication, but later on in our various performance measures, in our key deliverables. So then it became from communication to implementation. And that is how we look at it. Without that, without implementing, as she said, we can only talk about it. So that's how we looked into our cultural change, and I can assure you that Schneider Electric has made that impact in our culture.
It strikes me, just hearing you speak, Alina, that the commercial, economic pressure that organisations in this room can bring to bear would make politicians, our country, sit up and take note. And I think, Annie, you spoke about having a clear strategy for the things that you want to achieve, but you also said that an awful lot of this country is yet to understand the importance of the things you are saying. How do we motivate people to even consider behaviour change when they don't understand there's a problem?
I think human beings are always changing our behaviour. We're very good at it, aren't we? We're great at changing our behaviour. I'm shocked by a sort of story about a community I was visiting, where a number of elderly people were telling me that because of their electricity bills being so high, they go to bed early in the evening, and they change, behaviours change very quickly. Different stimuluses do it. Changing politicians, which is what your question said, I think that's a bit more difficult, because you see, they come out of a different horse box, and there's something about the voter and how we get votes and how we do this, really. And I think the work of Simon Sinek, it would be really important to understand that actually what we want our politicians to understand is, why are you there? I think cleverly said yesterday, actually, my role is to protect the people of this country. And that's what government's here for, to represent the people of this country and start putting the people of this country first. And actually we need I don't know how this happens, maybe not in my lifetime to see what happens, but actually we need a new political leadership that is devoted to serving the needs of the country and the needs of the world. And that needs a transformation of really what is going on in our country. I don't have the answers to these sort of things, but politicians seem more driven by what happens on the ballot box, and that's going to be very much what's going on, I think, in the next year. That's why I think the proposition that we say to them, this is what we think any new local government, any new should be concentrating on is something that would be maybe what we're trying to do is influence minds and influence people to do the right thing.
Yeah, doing the right thing, absolutely bang on. Thank you for your question. Other questions from the floor? There's a hand up just on the left, my left. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Tim Rook from Clade Engineering. We do commercial industrial heat pumps, and we've done a fair number of Salix funded projects. So I'd like to ask the panel, based on our experience of these projects, there are a lot of delays. There's a lot of frustration around planning, DNO connections, decision-making cycles, gets really, really slow. What are your ideas and how can we speed up delivery on the ground?
Where do we start? Darren, thoughts?
Yeah. So I don't know the source, unfortunately, but I saw in the news, it was only yesterday, it flashed up on my phone, about DNO specifically with the batteries. That's something we're heavily involved in. Actually removing large projects that are stagnant. So having lots of finance to supply a project is only one part of the goal. You've actually got to be able to deliver it, and we've all spoken about that today. So having the DNOs have maybe a time limit on how long you actually get to deliver what you have applied for, and importantly, not block the pipeline for other people. Sometimes you can get a large solar or battery farm that is applied for in an area, and that restricts anybody else from applying for that load in your case, or generation in our case. So ensuring that pipeline is true and accurate and relevant to the projects that are moving forwards and not stuck is how I would.
Because there's an awful lot of applications to DNOs for connections which are speculative,
Yes.
and there's no project there behind it
Exactly.
that can be financed and brought to bear, and it's holding up the whole process. We need to weed those out quickly, and that's presumably where government might take this, dependent upon their colour.
I would hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so. Brilliant question, thank you. Another question just behind that questioner, thank you.
Darren Talbot from D2I Management. Annie made a very good point earlier of talking about the top-down not working. So my question is, how do we overturn the anti-green rhetoric that some elements of the media are fairly intent on pushing at the moment?
The media has much to answer for. Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really valid point, Darren, and it is something that the media need to be held accountable for. They do a pretty poor show at showing the correct education to the wider public, and I think that's something that ultimately needs pressure putting on from all sides, really. I mean, our piece is, obviously, we're talking about hemp, which is industrial hemp, which is cannabis sativa ale, but we go and talk to most mainstream media outlets about hemp, and at best you get back, can you smoke it? And at worst you get back a lot worse. So it's an educational piece, but unfortunately, I have to be careful what I say, but unfortunately the gatekeepers are very much not engaged maybe with the wider population and wider business thoughts as well, because I think there's a huge support from business for net zero. I just think that there's not enough highlighting of that from media.
I think we're not doing enough actually as well, because you know, I actually have something, I want to say something good about the British press and whatever, because if you go on to somewhere like Fox News in America, it is dire. So, you know, we're not comparing like with like. But one of the things I do feel is that we're not doing enough. The number of people that I meet just in life, or you know, having been a chief executive of a local authority, is that the lack of our, what I call about educating, I don't want to sound patronising, but actually giving people real information. You know, we're too caught up on the bus. Don't do this for Brexit because then we'll have all this money for the NHS, which turns out to not be true at all, of course. So we've got all this sort of stuff going on and not enough stuff that's saying to people the relationship between the fact that we're burning gas to make electricity in our power stations, the fact that we have this reliance on fossil fuels, the way the weather is changing, the cost of energy, the interrelationship between these things, I think actually experts in this room sort of understand all of these connections, but I'm not convinced that we're really having what I would call the national debate about this, a real understanding, because I think when people start to talk about these things and start to understand about this thing, and you hear people's real life experiences about what this is doing to them, actually we start to get change. And then what the press say, briefed by whoever briefed them, becomes more questioning. People are more questioning about what they're being told. And I think that's something that we need and something that is important for our democracy.
Thank you, Annie. Alina, you had something.
Actually, a lot of what Annie said is exactly that. I think it's the bottom-up communication at the local level with people who are going to have to make changes, consumers. It's your neighbours, it's everyone else. And these conferences always inspire me, and I leave thinking, why aren't we having these conversations in the communities? Why aren't we presenting these same things to the public, not just to industry? And I think that bottom-up approach, that perseverance to address the challenges that we effectively put in our system, that it is perseverance and it's constant communication, and we just can't give up because there is no other option. We just have to keep going. And the passion that these organisations that we all work for have, it's infectious, and we need to go out and talk to people about it.
We absolutely do. Kevin, finally.
Yeah, no, I was going to add to that in terms of what we see. I think it goes back to one of the messages I was trying to get in our presentation, is that you talk to people and read in the media. It's all about what if, and sorry, what about. And what about usually is if something's going to go wrong. You know, I was reading articles yesterday on EVs, and you know, what about all the pollution you get from your tyres because they're so heavy, and et cetera, et cetera. I've been amazed by, you know, the what about. You're trying to do something good, but somebody, usually in the media, is saying, well, what about this? What about this? It won't work. It's selling fear. You know, hopefully what came across today, what we're trying to say is, well, what if? What if you did something? You know, there are positive outcomes. There are lots of clever people who can deliver positive outcomes, but it's, you know, it's those elements of society that ask what about rather than say, you know, what if.
What about thanking our panel? Round of applause.